Visa reported their fiscal Q4 after the markets closed today. Shares are down nearly 1% in the after hours. During the regular trade, they were up close to 1.3%, and so Visa giving up the gains from the day. We'll come in here, take a look at the technicals, and see if shares can be bought at this price. As always, if you are new to the channel and find this type of content valuable, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button below. We are on the road to 600 subscribers, and your support would mean a lot. Visa reported their fiscal Q4 and full year results. Non-GAAP net income coming in at $4.8 billion. That was good for $2.33 per share. And then revenues coming in at $8.6 billion. That was an increase of 11% year over year. Both of those were beats. So a nearly 3% beat on that bottom line, and then roughly in line on the revenue side. Now, Visa also repurchased and paid dividends of nearly $5 billion in this fourth quarter, and the board of directors increased Visa's quarterly cash dividend up 16% and authorized a new $25 billion multi-year share repurchase program. And so we'll come in here and see how Visa is repurchasing shares, and do they have the room to continue to grow that dividend. Now, Visa does provide outlook, and so for their fiscal 2024, the next upcoming year, Visa is expecting non-GAAP revenues to grow in the range of high single digit to low double digit. Now, over at Wall Street, the estimates were closer to the higher end of the range, nearly low double digits at 11%, at 10.5% for the upcoming fiscal 2024. So estimates over at Wall Street on that revenue growth side was a bit higher. Now, on the annual operating expense growth, Visa is expecting high single-digit growth on that expense side, and then EPS growing in the low teens for the upcoming year, and that is exactly what Wall Street has expected for Visa in the upcoming fiscal year 2024. Now, $9.82 is what Visa is expected to post for the full year next year, and they pay off a dividend of close to $1.80. That's a yield of nearly 0.8%. Now, that did get bumped up to close to $2.11 for the next year. And so Visa still, even at $2.11 for a forward dividend, still has a ton of room to pay out that dividend, considering their EPS for next year is expected to be in the range of $9.82. Now, this most recent Q4 was also absolutely fantastic, as net revenues coming in at $8.6 billion. That was good for 11% growth year over year. Now, overall, the operating expenses over at Visa also rising roughly in line. As you see, operating expenses rose 13% year over year from $2.7 billion up to $3 billion. And so your operating income coming in at $5.5 billion. Last year, we were at just $5 billion. So you see operating income also rising nearly 10%. Now, Visa is stellar on that operating income margins and even net income margins. You see these operating income margins are close to 65%. Yeah, 65% operating income margins. And what's even more stellar is their net income margins, as those are near 52%. If you take a look at $4.68 billion, so we take 4.68, divide that out by our revenues of close to $8.6 billion. Yeah, we come to net income margins of nearly 54.4%. That is absolutely stellar. That is one of the reasons why I absolutely love Visa stock, is the fact that so much of that top line revenue flows all the way down to their net income, which just means they have a ton of cash to return to shareholders. And one of the ways they do that is through stock repurchases. You see over the last year, Visa bought back nearly 30 million outstanding shares, and so their share count is now down to $1.6 billion. Those GAAP earnings coming in at $2.27. Even for a full year basis, this number was absolutely stellar at $8.30 and nearly $32.6 billion of revenue, and they generated close to $17 billion in net income. So again, absolutely stellar net income margins, well over 50%, and that is what I love about Visa. Now, coming down to their cash flows, let's take a look at how Visa spends all that net income. So we bring down that $17.2 billion net income line. We get to add back some share-based compensation and depreciation. We come to an operating cash flows for the full year at $20.7 billion. Now, that's a lot of money, and the way Visa spends it is primarily by financing activities. So they purchased nearly $12 billion worth of common stock. They paid off nearly $2.2 billion worth of debt, and $3.7 billion in dividends were paid off. And so from $20.7 billion worth of operating cash flow, they return nearly $17.7 billion worth of that straight to you as the shareholder in the form of repurchasing the stock, paying down debt, and paying out dividends. And so that right there is fantastic. That is why I love Visa, is that all that net income, all that cash flow comes right back to you in the forms of share repurchases, dividends, and dividend growth, and then paying down debt. And then the rest of their free cash flow they use in investing activities, in the purchasing of property, plant, and equipment. And then that's how they grow their top line over at Visa. And so overall, this steady business is absolutely fantastic. As you see, nearly 90% of your operating cash flows is returned back to you, the shareholder. From a balance sheet perspective, all things look great over at Visa. They're sitting on nearly $16.2 billion worth of cash and cash equivalents, and then total current assets at roughly $33.5 billion. They do have more current assets than current liabilities, as their current liabilities are at just $23 billion. Visa does have a fair amount of long-term debt, nearly $20.4 billion. And so while they don't have more cash than debt on their balance sheet, they do have more current assets than debt, which is good to see. And considering how much free cash flow this company generates, yeah, they can really pay this debt off in no time. They can very easily not buy back shares in one quarter and pay off a large chunk of this long-term debt. And so from a long-term debt and the balance sheet perspective, I'm not worried for Visa one bit, considering how much free cash flow and net income they generate over at Visa. Moving on to the technicals, this is a 1-year chart over at Visa, and really I can stretch it out over to 2 years. And yeah, this stock has been locked in an uptrend for a very long time. Now, year to date, this has really performed fairly in line with the S&P 500, as it's up just 11% over the past 1 year. Now, Visa themselves doing a large chunk of buybacks does provide a floor on this stock whenever it tends to head quite a bit lower. I'm sure Visa is coming in and buying back their stock. Now, from a support perspective, I do see this level close to $230 per share, basically right where the stock is, should act as some level of support in this uptrending channel. If it does break through this level, I see the first level of support for Visa close to $220 per share, as that's a point where it has rebounded a few times in the past. But I think closer to $210 per share and below is where I would really get excited to pick up shares of Visa. My only concern with this stock is it doesn't trade cheap. So considering how good Visa's fundamentals are, it trades at a 24 times next year's earnings and 21 times 2025 earnings. And so from that perspective, yeah, shares of Visa certainly don't trade cheap. I'm sure even on a price to sales basis, you're probably paying a pretty steep premium to these shares. But in my opinion, shares of Visa have always traded expensive. That's one of the reasons why it's so hard to enter a stock like Visa, is that the fundamentals are fantastic. The stock only keeps going up. It's just, it always trades expensive. And so if you can get over that, if you can pick up shares of Visa on any really major dip, you stretch this chart out over the past few years, it does have large dips every now and then, but those are few and far in between. But if you can pick up shares of Visa at any major dips, say close to $220 or even $210 per share, that would be a fantastic long-term buy and hold for Visa. This is one of those companies that you absolutely buy and hold and you don't even think about selling, considering how much dividend growth you'll get, considering how much share repurchase you'll get, and not to mention the steady capital appreciation over at Visa. Certainly the stock won't 2x your money within the next 1 year, but I think you can always expect Visa to at least perform in line with the S&P 500, if not outperform it every now and then. So that was my take on Visa, one of the stock that I love to buy and hold, and absolutely don't mind picking more shares up at a lower price and dollar cost averaging my position. Let me know your thoughts on Visa in the comments below. As always, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next video.